we at EA think about it sort of in what we call a posture model, which is, if you think about how you play a game, it's where you sit. So the first of those, what people would traditionally think of as playing video games, is what we call a lean back experience. So you're in your living room, you're sitting on your couch with a big screen TV playing a game. And that's, I think, in the conventional sense, that's what many people would think of as a gaming experience. And that still is a very big part of the market, despite any news that you might read. I think, for us, it's very much where EA has been very successful and where we anticipate being very successful going forward, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. The next of those is what we call a lean over experience. So if you have your phone in your hand and you're walking down the street, you're leaning over effectively. And so what that means is that your game experience could happen anywhere. So you could be on the train, you could be at a cafe, you could be any number of places still interacting with games. And I think the potential of that, which again I'll talk a little bit more about, is that the experience that you take out of home exists in the cloud and can go with you anywhere and persist on the console experience, exists on your mobile experience as well. And the last of those is what we call lean in. So if you're sitting at a desk and you're looking at a PC, you're leaning in. And again, the PC market is one that has been really the center of gravity of gaming for a long time, where a lot of the innovation has come from. So if we look at the marketplace now, a lot of the innovation in terms of new genre types and games has come from PC. A lot of the innovation in the free-to-play business model came from the PC space, and I think that continues to be the case. So that's sort of like how we structure the different pieces of the marketplace, and that also informs how we think about our business going forward, which I'll talk a little bit about. And that leads into EA's strategy, which is basically tied to these three broad tenets. So the first of those is our brand. So EA has a collection of pretty well-known properties that really run the gamut from those that are centered in the core audience. So if you think about, again, that kind of traditional notion of who plays video games, we have franchises that appeal to that set. So that might be, for instance, in the action category, first-person shooter, racing, things like that. And then at the other end of the spectrum are things that have very wide audience appeal, which I think would traditionally be called casual, but I think that's a misnomer in the sense that many of those games also have very compelling game experiences. They're very accessible, but can also be very challenging at the same time. So they, I think, just have a broader audience appeal. So I think I would just describe that as more general entertainment. The games aren't necessarily casual. They're also very rich and meaningful games. But I think across EA we have franchises and intellectual properties that speak to all of those different gameplay types and audience compositions as well. The next piece of that we think about is our approach to platforms, both our own platform, which I talked a little bit about, which is just the notion of delivering our game services digitally to our consumers, and that's through things like Origin, which I talked a little bit about, and then also on all the different devices where people play. So how can we connect all of those experiences and create a platform for games? And that's been a big initiative for EA over the last couple of years. We're transitioning to a place where we're essentially, again, running an online service, and that's very much been a learning process for EA over the last few years, most acutely in the last couple of weeks, I would say. I'm not sure if any of you have been following this story with our recent release of SimCity. And I think, sort of the takeaway there is, one, it's not as straightforward to run a game service as it is to release a game. And I think going forward, very much the impetus is on us as a company to make sure that the foundation of that service is rock solid, and really, we can know that our consumers know that they have a reliable product and service that will be ready when they want it. So again, I think that's a big part of what we're doing going forward is how do we connect those brands with that platform to be able to allow them to exist everywhere where people play games. And the last big piece of our strategy for the company is our talent. So really the people are really the value of the company. So there are now approximately 10,000 people within EA. Many of them, there's about nearly 2/3 of that is in our organization in the Labels, which is the product development organization. So, and that really runs the gamut from every aspect of game making, from engineering to design, sound, art, music, what have you, and then also many of the supporting functions for that. So people like myself and Ben who work in strategy and analytics and are trying to understand both what are the broader market dynamics and what's happening within our products, and then many other functions as well that support that. So like our information infrastructure, marketing, operations, really the entire gamut of functions. I've learned so much in the last few years, and I've learned so much more in the last year particularly. Now at EA we have a shuttle. I live in San Francisco. I rode my bike here. I was talking to someone about that. That made me feel quite a bit more Dutch, which was cool. But anyway, so now we have a shuttle that picks up here in San Francisco and takes us to our office in Redwood City. And just in the course of that, I've met so many people that work in different parts of the company and many of the things that are really beyond my comprehension. And I think it really speaks to just the level of complexity and also sheer scale that goes into making these products that really, excite and delight millions of people around the world. And it's been like really fascinating and great learning for me as well. And like I've just had the opportunity to meet so many people that are really good at what they do, which is great. It's definitely spacebar. So that all ties into what we within the Label organization, which again is the game development organization in EA, how we think about delivering those products to our consumers, which is connecting them across all these different devices and platforms. So we talked about lean back, lean over, and lean forward, the different elements of that through one single identifier, which is you as a gamer and your connection to EA. So we have a service called Nucleus, which basically is your EA account. So when you sign into an EA game, it creates your identity of what games you've played and what you've done in those games, and that persists with you no matter what game that you're playing within EA's network, and sort of tracks that record over time. And that's the way in which we can paint that profile of who you are. And really, sort of the tangent of that is we want to be able to offer that in any way that people want to play a game. So yeah, please.
How come you don't have smart TVs on that?
That's a great point. I would think you could sort of put it here in the HD console. So I think if you were thinking of the lean back, it kind of falls in that realm. We probably will have more nodes on this at some point, but I think with this many, it's aesthetically pleasing. So that's my real answer. But I think that's a great point. That's something that we think about a lot. One thing that we've been looking at quite a bit more now is the opportunity on the Android platform. This is a project that Ben and I and another of our teammates have been working on the last few months, is the opportunity on the Android platform, which has been growing a lot over the last few years, become essentially the largest computing platform now. And I think, going forward, we'll try to think about like what that means for mobile phones and tablets, but also smart TV as well, because it'll probably be one of the most prevalent smart TV platforms.
Yeah, there's a big fight with the smart TV industry where the Samsung, which is a major manufacturer, feels that the Android's coming on strong, but they don't want to be trapped to one platform.
Yeah.
So they're developing their own platforms for the smart TV. So it's interesting, there's a big fight going on in China and Asia.
Yeah.
Who's going to dominate the smart TV market?
Yeah, and I think for EA, we're generally platform agnostic. I think the general thinking is we'll go where there's enough opportunity to justify doing so. So a lot of these things, you have to wait until it's clear that there's a compelling business opportunity, and then we'll get there relatively quickly. So I think, right now, it's not something that has really justified a significant level of investment, but we anticipate it for sure. And I think really sort of thinking of how we get to a strong entrenched position on Android, on mobile phones and tablets, will be a good springboard to that. Yeah. Just the other thing I was going to say is really we want to think about how to deliver our products to consumers in the way that they want them. So that's both on devices and also in the business model that makes sense for them. So if they want to come into the game for free, if they just want to buy the whole thing end to end, really just offering a range of those experiences. And here are some examples of some of our franchises, which again, like I said, are really across the spectrum of things that appeal to many different audiences. So we have our sports business, which many people are familiar with. FIFA now is one of the biggest games in our industry. And then sort of in between there, we have the core franchises like Battlefield and Need for Speed. And then also those more general entertainment properties, like I mentioned, which a great example of that is The Simpsons Tapped Out, which is a game we released last fall. Now has almost 5 million players every day on both iOS and Android platforms. Oh, sorry. Should we restart now or postpone?
You have no choice.
I don't think I have any say in the matter. Wow. Well, we have 15 minutes.
14 minutes
We
left.
have 15 minutes. The clock's ticking. Yeah, so like I said, really what we're trying to do is make our franchises some of the biggest and best in our industry, and this is the evidence of that. Over the last few years, FIFA has grown substantially and is now about $1 billion in revenue. This year, we're releasing Battlefield 4. We have a big announcement today and tomorrow. That was another subtle plug for Battlefield 4, which we anticipate will soon become another $1 billion franchise as well. So that's kind of the evidence of how we think of our franchises being very broad in reach and offering experiences for many different gamers on many different devices as well. Another big piece of what we're doing, I said, is delivering our content digitally, and really that is evidenced by the chart on the left, which is our digital revenue growth over the last few fiscal years, which before this was really something that we were kind of doing ancillary and opportunistically, but now it's very much part of the foundation of our business, and this is the mix of those revenues across all those different digital streams. So there are many different ways to monetize our games. So we can offer subscriptions. There are add-on content to the full game. So if you buy the game and then you get an expansion pack or some additional items, things like that. So many different flavors of that, and all of them are things that resonate with different types of consumers. So I'll talk a little bit about just our plans for each of these 3 different modes. So the posture model that I referenced earlier, and this is really what it looks like for EA going forward. So the first of those is on NextGen Consoles. Just recently Sony announced their plans for PS4, and we anticipate that there might be another large first-party hardware manufacturer that will make an announcement at some point. But I've been cautioned very strongly that that's absolutely the most that I can say about that. And then the other is on mobile phones. EA has done really well historically in the mobile space, from the really Java brew era into the smartphone era. In any given month, we're close to #1 on the iOS platform, and that's a position that we're trying to shore up substantially. And the last is just the PC, which is still a very robust and vibrant gaming platform. So the first is on the NextGen Consoles. Really what they offer us is the opportunity to do things that haven't been done before. Just the computing power that will be available will just unlock many more technological and technical innovations, and I think that's something that our developers are working very excitedly about. So within EA, one of our key technologies is the Frostbite engine, which is one of our primary game engines. For this generation, I will be building on Frostbite 3, which enables some very cool special effects, which hopefully you guys will get to check out the Battlefield trailer tomorrow, and you'll see what I mean, but it's very impressive. I think beyond that, it builds on top of what's available today. But I think truly there's also an opportunity in making content more accessible, and I think that comes from new modes of interaction. So whether that's a motion interface or using a second screen, a tablet as a controller, which now is something that many more people are familiar with operating, rather than just a traditional game controller, which has so many buttons and can be hard to move up the learning curve. So I think that really opens up a lot more accessibility for our potential players who might have been shy of trying to pick up games and playing on a console. The next is really just on mobile phones. What we've seen is a tremendous growth in the possibility of the technology there. So the chart on the right is basically a projection of the processing power of the iPad platform respective to the current generation consoles. So you can see right there that the next iPad will be roughly on par with the current gen consoles in terms of the computing power that it's capable of. And really what that means is an experience that's very high fidelity and starts to resemble more and more what you would see on a traditional HD game. And I think that's very compelling because, again, it allows developers to do things that might have not previously been possible.